When it comes to the OG Joes, rock and roll is pretty sweet. I mean, machine gun and ammo belts around his chest? Kinda neat. But in 1984, Hasbro said, let's one up the roll and rock. We need someone bigger. Enter Roadblock, a towering giant with gun twice the size, turning Cobra's plans into deep-fried surprise. But when the fight's over, here's the real hook. This heavy machine gunner is one hell of a cook. If you're a regular viewer of my channel, you'll know that I am Filipino, born and raised in the Philippines. And for those not in the know, as controversial as this may sound, as a generally described brown race of peeps, it's an almost stereotypical quirk that we Filipinos are sort of seen as being obsessed with lighter skin, which I guess you can connect to being an American colony for almost 50 years. Unfortunately though, on the flip side, darker skin was often, well, looked down upon, especially with the much older generations. And as such, as a rather naughty kid growing up in the late 70s, in order to keep me in line, my yaya, or for you Westerners, my nanny, would often threaten me by telling me that if I wasn't good, she would hand me over to the black man. Yeah, again, it was a different time. Now before all the pitchforks and torches start coming out calling for my yaya's cancellation, may she rest in peace. The reason I bring up this rather awkward story is that so I could properly explain the confusion going on in my head the first time I saw the G.I. Joe Roadblock on the card back of my Duke action figure, the first toy that I would get my hands on from the 1984 wave of Joes. Fortunately, by that time, at the tender age of 8, my perception of black people had thankfully progressed from a source of fear propagated by my yaya into one of admiration through cool characters like Lando Calrissian from Star Wars and real people like Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Yep, I bleed purple and gold. And so yes, when I first saw Roadblock, the initial thoughts that came to my mind were awesome and evil donkey. Sorry, as a kid, badass still wasn't part of my vocabulary. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling in the back of my head that I'd seen him before. And then it hit me, as Roadblock, or someone pretty close to his look, was the image that popped in my head as a younger child whenever my yaya would mention the black man. Anyway, before I dig myself deeper into that hole, let's just get one thing straight. Despite my twisted childhood, first impression of Roadblock? Good. And it only got better when I first saw him in the second G.I. Joe miniseries, The Revenge of Cobra. Roadblock was one of the most featured new characters in that series, and he easily catapulted into one of the most memorable and fan favorites in my book. And for one simple reason, he was cool. I mean, there's like cool, and then there's cool, if you know what I mean. And Roadblock definitely was the latter. Huge and imposing frame aside, his look was definitely softened up from his original card art, which I guess was par for the course for the cartoons. But more than that, it was in the way that Roadblock spoke, in a soft but firm, sly but strong swagger. And he rhymed, with almost every single line. And as I mentioned earlier, Roadblock had his own unique little adventure in the series. In fact, you could say it was a starring role. So as the story goes, Duke and Snake Eyes are captured by Cobra, and the Joes, led by Flint, pursue them on their Sky Strikers. Unfortunately for them, this chase is orchestrated to lead the Joes right into the path of Destro's new weapon, the Weather Dominator, which sets off a massive tornado just as the Sky Strikers are above the ominous Pit of Chaos. While some Joes manage to escape, the strong winds take down 3 Sky Strikers piloted by Flint, Mutt and Junkyard, and Roadblock respectively, right into the pit, which is apparently seeded with another of Destro's more natural inventions, Killer Strangler Vines, which are activated by the rains caused by the Dominator. Fortunately, the Joes managed to temporarily activate a fallen Sky Striker's thrusters to keep the vines at bay while they simultaneously MacGyver up a literal helicopter platform to fly out of the pit. Well, sorta. Flint, Mutt, and Junkyard manage to escape and go off on their own little adventure, which you can follow in this story. But Roadblock gets held back by the vines and is left to fight for himself. until the rains stop and all the vines dry out. Once free of the vines, Roadblock gets out of the hole and starts to roll, escapes from a pair of cougars. No, not these cougars. There, that's better. And stows away inside a truck commandeered by Cobra, wherein he meets another prisoner, a civilian named Miss Honda Lou West, the original owner of the trucks full of the finest victuals you ever did see. Hey, at least we know that Cobra's eating well. Anyway, after a rather humorous exchange wherein Roadblock introduces himself as part of the G.I. Joe team, and Honda Lou exclaims that she didn't care if he was with the Tooth Fairy, which we'll get into a little later on, the two strike up the beginnings of a beautiful friendship, which is quite convenient as the trucks make their way right into the heart of Cobra's secret temple. While inside Cobra's secret temple, Roadblock pays Cobra Commander a quick personal visit and casually bowls over a few Cobra troopers while singing the G.I. Joe theme song. Seriously. But is eventually overcome by an oddly flamethrower-armed scrap iron who commands the Cobra boys in blue to take them from behind. Yeah, okay. Get your minds out of the gutter on that one. As prisoners, they are reunited with Duke and Snake Eyes, and together, after an arena battle with some 80s Tron-inspired serpents, this fantastic foursome defeat Cobra from within, specifically Roadblock, who uses a few stolen vines to finally take out Destro and his Weather Dominator before he could unleash its power on the oncoming Joe team. So I guess you could say that Roadblock saved the day. Anyway, going back to that original meetup with Honda Lou West inside that stolen truck, aside from mentioning that he was part of G.I. Joe, Roadblock also mentions that he is a gourmet chef, which is most likely the second most important thing that Roadblock is known for after being the Joe's heavy machine gunner. In fact, as stated in his original file card, it was his love for the culinary arts that got him to join the military in the first place. Roadblock, real name Marvin F. Hinton's original dream was to become a gourmet chef, and he worked as a bouncer to earn enough money to attend the Escoffier School in France, when he was spotted by an army recruiter who convinced him that the army could train him to be a chef. Of course, all they gave him was a pet rat named Remy to help stir the pots. Just kidding. Bottom line though, Roadblock found the army menus and preparation techniques quite appalling, and so transferred to the infantry where he excelled at using heavy weapons, and the rest, as they say, is history. As expected, the original Marvel comics gave us a more serious and extremely patriotic version of Roadblock. How patriotic, you may ask? Well, patriotic enough to threaten a dude who had plans of burning the American flag by pointing his signature weapon, the M2 Browning .50 cal heavy machine gun, right at his face, asking him to desist in his actions, or he would be obliged to reduce the dude's head to a fine red mist. But I'm getting ahead of myself on that one. So back up to the start. Roadblock made quite the memorable debut in the comics when he single-handedly gunned down a Cobra Rattler as it had its sights and weapons locked in on a helpless Joe team as they lay exposed in the open during the funeral of their fallen leader, General Flag. Okay, fine. I guess you could say that he had a little help from the G.I. Joe First Sergeant Duke, who also was introduced in that issue. But really, a pistol against a jet? Anyway, officially a member of the G.I. Joe team, Roadblock's first mission was to keep guard over a captured Cobra commander, who unfortunately was eventually rescued by the ninja Storm Shadow. But to his credit, Roadblock ended up capturing Storm Shadow instead, so not too bad for a first mission. And since then, Roadblock was a regularly featured character in the comics, up until the original run ended with the team being decommissioned in issue 155. Comics publisher Devil's Due did pick up a few years story-wise where Marvel left off, with many of the Joes, including Roadblock, having returned to civilian life. And this finds Roadblock having his own cooking show called Kiss Your Mama Home Cooking, being backed by a mysterious financier who turns out to be, dun dun dun, Extensive Enterprises, as part of their plan to launder money to, I'm guessing, fund a returning Cobra. Anyway, when their little scheme is discovered by resident Joe computer specialist Mainframe, the twins, Tomax and Samot, decide to cut their losses and send the Dreadnoks, Burnout, Heart Wrencher, Naga Hide, Rugrat, and a bunch of other unnamed dudes. Seriously, is this the B team or what? To trash Roadblock's cooking show on live TV. In the end, Roadblock manages to defeat the Knox with a little help from his co-host, Miss Mona Butcher, star of the TV show The Nanny, The Au Pair from Jersey, and her lactose-intolerant doggy, Miss Dimples. Yeah, I'm not making this up. Anyway, despite losing his original backer, the on-air fight gains Roadblock even more popularity and a new show, Cooking with Kung Fu Grip, where every week he fights a new menace with instruments of cuisine, most notable of which would be his now best-selling Marvin Hinton Grill. Rest in peace, George Foreman. I know, it's a really hokey issue, but what's G.I. Joe without a little hokiness here and there? Is that even a word? But since we're back on the hokiness train, let's jump back into the cartoons where Roadblock had quite the memorable role in the 1987 animated movie. Pretty similar to his original cartoon debut, Roadblock is part of a team of Joes who pursues Cobra after an initial failed attack. Unfortunately for the Joes, they are led straight into the lair of Cobra Law, where they are easily defeated by their new ancient enemy and taken prisoner. Anyway, during an escaped attempt, while the rest of his team is recaptured, a temporarily blinded Roadblock manages to escape with the help of a mutated Cobra commander, who was once a man. After wandering around in the snow for some time, the unlikely pair are eventually found by a Joe search party, or actually, they end up stumbling into one. And with his vision restored, Roadblock manages to get Cobra Commander to lead them close enough to Cobra Law for the new rawhide recruit Tunnel Rat to find a back door. And with the Joes inside the final third act of the movie, the battle between the Joes and Cobra Law takes place. Oh, and Duke wakes up from his coma, and he is A-OK. Yay! And you know what else there is to yay about? At the time of making this video, I am slowly closing in on my 8,000th subscriber. Awesome! And I am so thankful for every single one of you who's been a part of me getting to this point. But if there's anyone else out there enjoying this video who hasn't subscribed, then what are you waiting for? Help a brother out! Your one little click will go a long way in helping my channel grow big time, and I will be eternally grateful for all your support. So, to everyone out there, thank you. After the original cartoon ended, years later, Roadblock had two more notable animated appearances. First, in the much-loved micro-series G.I. Joe Resolute, where a much more harder-edged Roadblock leads a strike team comprised of himself, Gung-Ho, and the two Rangers, Stalker and Beachhead, to rescue a bunch of scientists held hostage by Destro and the Baroness. How much more hard-edged? Well, how about laughing maniacally as he mows down a squad of poor alley vipers with their backs turned hard-edged? Oh, and he also comically knocks out Destro via grenade launcher to his silver metal noggin. Sweet. The second Roadblock would be in the series G.I. Joe Renegades, where we get a much more cheerful and calm Roadblock, who's traded in his signature mustache and occasional goatee with some thick sideburns. Anyway, this Roadblock was part of the main crew of soldiers on the run for crimes that they didn't commit. Aside from being the cliche big guy of the group, this Roadblock was less machine gunner and more resident mechanic and driver of their stolen armored truck that he lovingly dubbed the Coyote. I mean, this Roadblock loved his truck, where he likened the truck to a well-cultured and athletic woman. Yeah, okay. But possibly the most memorable version of Roadblock, apart from the OG version, would be the Roadblock we got in the second live-action movie, G.I. Joe Retaliation. But before we go there, I think it's worth noting that Roadblock was planned to be included in the first movie as well, to be played by the rapper Common. But ultimately, the producers decided to go with another Joe, Heavy Duty, who was originally introduced into the toy line as a sort of replacement for Roadblock when Hasbro momentarily lost a trademark to his name. In the end, both Heavy Machine Gunners, or to be more specific to Heavy Duty, Heavy Ordnance Trooper, existed in most iterations of G.I. Joe as cousins. Except in the live-action movie, wherein, judging by his accent, Heavy Duty, played by the massive actor Adewale Akinnuoye Agbaje, or Mr. Echo from Lost, was British. Part of the whole let's change this whole real American thing into a more international operation nonsense. Anyway, I got a little off tangent there. So, in the second movie, Roadblock was included in the main cast. And more than that, Hasbro wanted to make a big splash and cast Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to play the iconic heavy machine gunner. And with a big star came one hell of a promotion, as Roadblock was now the new leader of G.I. Joe. Well, he did start off as second in command, but when his best buddy Duke was blown to bits in the first part of the movie, along with the majority of the Joe team, Roadblock was there to take command of the surviving Joes and to, well, retaliate. Now, I have nothing against Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who also played the Tooth Fairy, a funny coincidence from Hondalu's flippant comment all those years ago, but he was definitely not the classic Roadblock we all knew or wanted. He basically did what he does with all his roles. Play with himself. Play himself. The Rock, which, to be fair, is in itself an entertaining character. My main problem with this Roadblock is that in their effort to make him the center of the G.I. Joe franchise, they pretty much threw out the window everything that made the OG Roadblock special and unique, in my opinion. He didn't need to rhyme when he spoke, although that would have been cool, but he definitely does not need to be a ninja. Okay, to be fair, he wasn't portrayed as a ninja in the movie, but almost every damned action figure of Roadblock from the movie was labeled as a ninja commando, whatever that is, and had a frickin' Arashikage tattoo plastered on his arm. I find it so dumb how when first introduced, that tattoo was meant to be a secret, mysterious thing that only a choice few individuals knew about, or let alone had on their body. A hidden sign that indicated membership in an exclusive and, more importantly, secret martial arts clan. But now, they pretty much Oprah'd the whole thing with, "You've got a tattoo, now you've got a tattoo, everybody's got a tattoo." Oh well. So as far as I'm concerned, this isn't my Roadblock, more of Road Rock. But let's get back on a more positive note, shall we? With toys of actual Roadblocks. Starting with the original one released in 1984 with his signature orange pants and camouflage sleeveless top. This was then followed up with his almost equally iconic bright green vested look released in 1986. Now, I don't know about you, but I was never a big fan of this look, as the original looked so badass to me that this one looked a little more generic and boring. Anyway, 2 years later, that original look was brought back with a new Tiger Force deco, which, while not my cup of tea, was still a welcome return in my book. And before the original Real American Hero line ended in 1994, Hasbro managed to keep Roadblock relevant with a rather unremarkable Battle Core version in 1992, and jazzed them up a little bit more with a neon green weapons harness the following year. But also in 1993, another version of Roadblock was released where he literally took to the stars as a member of Star Brigade. No longer a heavy machine gunner, but a space gunner. Roadblock is definitely much stronger than your average Joe with his M2 Browning machine gun, which he handles with ease, weighing up to 134 pounds, and usually requires a dedicated squad to transport and operate. But I'm sure even he would appreciate the 0 G's in space, making his weapons a whole lot easier to handle. In any case, if a generic white spacesuit isn't to your liking, Hasbro gave us one more spacesuit Roadblock in his signature orange color. Kinda nice, like going back full circle to the OG figure. Anyway, as always, we end things with the latest releases of Roadblock that I have. Given his iconic stature, Roadblock was part of the first 5 Modern Joes released in a commemorative box set that launched the 25th anniversary line in 2007. But as cool as this guy was, he was pretty scrawny and undersized. Same with the inevitable neon green vested version. Fortunately, later releases like Resolute Roadblock in 2010, the Renegades one in 2017, and a retro one in 2020 had bigger, more suitably sized bodies. And speaking of bigs, let's finish things off with a bigger 1/12 scale. To no one's surprise, Roadblock was part of the first wave of G.I. Joe classified figures in 2020? 21? Anyway, unfortunately, it was based on his neon green vest look, so it was an easy pass for me, along with another unusual modern take of Roadblock as an exclusive as well. I waited for the inevitable heavy artillery version, which looked more like the OG Roadblock, with unfortunately not quite the right accessories and, more importantly, weapon. But that was easily remedied when a proper M2 Browning was released with their generic 60th anniversary Action Soldier Infantry, which came with one. So for now, I'm good. Yeah, he still doesn't have the right backpack, but whatever. I'm not in the mood to splurge on the Tiger Force Roadblock to get it. Besides, at this point, Hasbro pretty much has all the ingredients for a proper retro version, which pretty much seems inevitable. And finally, last but not least, as always, we have the Super 7 Ultimates version. Again, not as exciting or visually interesting as the classified Roadblock. But if the cartoons are your jam, then this is your jelly. I mean, I swear, I can imagine this guy spitting out some cool sounding rhyme and smoothly asking,
"Who wants a body massage?"
If you know, you know. And as far as the Joes are concerned, knowing is half the battle. And on that note, if you want to know more about Roadblock's usual partner in fighting for freedom whenever there's trouble, the chesty Marine Gung Ho, you can check out his story over here. Or if you want other G.I. Joe stories, you can check out this playlist over here. Either way, thanks for watching, and I hope you come back for more.
Body massage.